so much more needs to be done, and I definitely need to get caught up on some of the more recent literature on the subject. But whether it's in my classes or in these spaces or in what is kind of it's not a flood, but a steady stream of emails and chat messages that I get regarding this subject. Not all of them friendly, not all of them comradely or principled, but often with this theme. And as I was telling some friends who I think take for granted a position on multiraciality, biraciality, the mixed race, et cetera, and so forth. Um, I told them that for me, having these conversations or being asked or invited to respond to certain things happens all the time because as uh, um, I've been encouraged more recently and I don't fully agree with this, but I'll acknowledge that there are folks who would prefer that I self-identify as a black identifying biracial man, but who is often in black and black radical political spaces and at least desires to be. This issue comes up all the time, and one of the things that is thrown at me often when there is a desire to demean me personally or those like me as a group are histories of betrayal of the Black Revolution by colored, mulatto, mixed race communities. So I know there's a lot more to get into, and I'm not prepared to do all that tonight. But I did share a quick comment with a group that I had been invited, that I actually shared somewhere else. But because in fact, one of in two different places, in two different contexts, with two different sort of political and I think principled purposes, reference to CLR James' Black Jacobins came up, and this his specific section of the book where he talks about mulattoes betraying the Black Revolution. And as I've had some of these debates, even on Twitter, sometimes I've asked, I've wanted to ask without it being seen as me being defensive or what I don't think I am, someone who wants to avoid these things. But I want to have these discussions increasingly as I get older in very specific settings with very specific people. But I've raised the question, well, what is the data that suggests that, for instance, because CLR James and others can point to very real, specific, and accurate histories where communities of so-called colored, mulatto, mixed race, etc., have worked against the Black community, or certainly a Black or African revolution. But how do we, in terms of data and analysis, extrapolate from that to say that that is evidence that an individual multiracial, biracial, mulatto, however we want to, half caste, whatever we want to call ourselves or be called, will themselves be more likely to betray the Black or African revolution? And to what extent can that be measured against, for instance, those within Black and African communities who are quote unquote fully Black or African, who are invited to neo-colonial positions of power, the Black bourgeoisie, or into class hostilities against the the untalented 90th or whatever, you know, and then so all right, so I just wrote this down and said, so something I forgot to mention to you all back during the mulatto discussion, and that has come up elsewhere, is that one flaw with how Jacobins and others similar work are used is that they ignore context and politics, certainly of today and what I'm talking about now. Mulattoes acting as a distinct community, class, or nation will, of course, be hostile to Black or African communities and certainly revolutionary ones. The point is, how and why did they become made distinct? And how does that relate to today? their distinction or our distinction functions no differently than when a black bourgeoisie is selected for distinction and played against the rest. So the point should be to make the one drop rule revolutionary, resist the imposed separation, and then destroy all classes.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.